Welcome to Vermont Today. I'm Terry Jeroloman, and my guests for this segment of the show are Frank Haddleton and Pete Garritano. Frank is a lawyer practicing here in Burlington, and Pete is a car salesman. Pete, you own and operate or manage the Hyundai dealer, is it?
No, I'm the used car manager at Burlington Hyundai and Subaru.
So you get to meet a lot of people in the Burlington area that way.
And the retail business, yeah, absolutely.
And Frank, you practice law here in Burlington, right?
I do practice law, among other things. I've been a lawyer for 20 years, and for a long time I had a large law practice in which I focused on tax law and estate planning. Since I've been in Vermont, which has been about 10 years, I've also been doing property management and trust management.
So you manage rental properties?
I do manage properties here in Burlington, right.
So you get to meet a lot of people that way, too.
I do indeed. I do indeed.
We're here to talk about the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. And we've all become interested in that through one means or another. Frank, how did you first become interested in the 9/11 terrorist attacks?
Well, this was about 4 years ago. I was visiting an old friend in Florida whom I had not seen in many, many years. This is someone who I have tremendous respect for, extremely intelligent, well-read, very knowledgeable about all kinds of issues. And we were at the beach, and he was just starting to tell me that there were really troubling questions about what really happened on 9/11, and he told me that the buildings couldn't have collapsed as the result of plane crashes, and he told me that the evidence at the Pentagon suggested that it couldn't have been a plane that had done the damage there, and various other things. And I remember at the time, I sort of thought, it's kind of too bad that my old friend has kind of lost it. I really thought he was maybe just a little off. But I had enough respect for him to dig a little deeper and to read a little bit, and coincidentally, a couple of months later, David Ray Griffin, who is a theologian from California who's been doing an awful lot of writing about 9/11, came and did a presentation at UVM. And so I had the opportunity to go to that. I believe it was in October of '05. And I remember halfway through Griffin's presentation, as he was describing the collapses of the towers and the eyewitnesses that reported hearing explosions and flashes and all kinds of other impossibilities in the official story, I remember halfway through the lecture thinking, oh, expletive, expletive, the world doesn't work the way I thought, and thinking this is incredible, but it's true. The official story cannot be right. And since that time, honestly, I've spent a lot of time doing further research, meeting other people who have the same questions, and I've devoted a lot of time to it. And I find it to be a very compelling, fascinating, and extremely important issue that will remain an important issue. And so, here I am, and I've worked on a website that we have, and I still hold the view that the official story cannot be true in material respects, and while I don't know what really happened on 9/11, I do know we need a new investigation because the consequences are just so huge.
And Pete, how did you first become interested in the 9/11 question?
Well, I think it was about 3 years ago. I was driving to Delaware, where I grew up, to a wedding, and I was going by New York City, and there was a radio program. I was surfing the channels because there's a lot of interesting channels in the big city area, and I got on this channel where they were doing a benefit, and it was for loose change, and this film that was coming out. And I listened for about a half an hour, and I got really curious, and when I got home, I ordered a copy of the film, Loose Change. And then I watched it, and pretty much the same thing happened to me that happened to Frank. I just went, wow, there's some serious problems here, and the story we've been told just can't be true. And he looked at it and said, even if only 20% of this is wrong, it's a big problem. And then when I got back, I was having a chiropractic adjustment, and the person that was working on me started talking about 9/11, and she had the same concerns, and she said, you know, there's a bunch of people that meet at the bookstore downtown every Monday or Tuesday night. And I ended up going down there, and that's where I met Frank and a bunch of other people, and we would have weekly or bi-monthly discussions about this and new evidence and things, and just back and forth and try to learn more and, you know, see what we could find out.
When I first became aware of 9/11, I actually was living in Albany in 2001, and I remember hearing on the radio that there had been an attack on the Trade Center, and so I watched it on TV, and I watched the planes coming into the buildings, and I remember that evening or the next day we were discussing it on the emails, and I in one of the emails I said, this sure looks an awful lot like the Reichstag. But then I thought, well, no, that can't be true. Nobody else thinks that. So I've sort of forgotten about it for a couple of years. And then I moved to Vermont, and I was in Middlebury, and they had a program at the library in Middlebury, and they showed a video. I'm not sure whether it was loose change or not, but it was similar. And I realized that I had been right in the beginning, that this just wasn't the way the official story went. And since then, I've looked into it too. And David Ray Griffin, which Frank, you just mentioned, he's written several books. I went down to Keene, New Hampshire to hear him talk. I also heard him talk at UVM. The best book that he's written that I like is Christian Faith and the Truth Behind 9/11. David Ray Griffin is a professor of theology at what university is he at?
Couldn't tell you at the moment.
No, but he has impeccable credentials and very much establishment background. And I recommend all of his books, but especially Christian Faith and the Truth Behind 9/11. That's a very interesting book from the point of view of Christianity too, because it takes a rationalistic perspective of Christianity from a political point of view. And then the second half of the book, of course, is devoted entirely to 9/11 and ties it in with the politics in Rome at the time of Christ. What is the most important thing about the 9/11 attack that make you question the official report, Frank?
Well, you know, it's hard to say, because the truth of it is, if you look at any single component of the official story, whether it's the World Trade Center or what happened at the Pentagon or the flight that allegedly crashed over Pennsylvania, or you know, details about the alleged terrorists, essentially none of the components hold up. None of them fit with the evidence that actually exists. But to answer your question, for me the biggest problem relates to the collapses of the World Trade Center towers. And you know, I was one of many people who never questioned the story until someone pointed out to me that there were problems. But I think the reason for that is a lot of us, having heard the reports so many times, Al-Qaeda, 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 and the story got repeated so many times, and of course it was such a shocking event that we were almost in a hypnotic trance about it, and we didn't question it. But the problem with the official story with respect to the collapse is none of it makes sense. Many key problems. There was molten metal found beneath all three towers, and there were three towers, not two, that collapsed on 9/11. The molten metal cannot be explained by the official story because the fires in the buildings were not hot enough to melt steel, and the official investigations have confirmed that they were not. The buildings fell at near free fall speed. World Trade Center 7, which is the third tower that most people don't know about it, actually did fall at free fall speed for the first 2 or 3 seconds, and that has been admitted to by the official investigators, but there's no explanation for that. There were explosions in all three towers prior to the collapses. And of course, testimony about these explosions was completely omitted from the 9/11 Commission report. For me, one of the more fascinating reports of explosions comes from a New York City official by the name of Barry Jennings, who was in World Trade Center 7, the 47-story tower. He had gone there after the Twin Towers were struck by airplanes, but before any of the collapses occurred. He and New York City's Corporation Council both were there in the building. And they were alone in an emergency management center, and they picked up the phone. Where is everyone? They were told they had to leave the building immediately. But in the course of their trying to leave the building, as they were going down the stairs, there was a major explosion, the stairs collapsed, and they were trapped in the building for an hour and a half before the firefighters could get them out. But Barry Jennings, who strangely enough is now deceased and we don't know why, is absolutely certain, I should say, was absolutely certain that this major explosion preceded the collapses of the Twin Towers. So there's absolutely no explanation for this major explosion that destroyed the stairwell.